Tuesday, 2:47 p.m. downtown Chicago. The marble floor of First National Bank gleams beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, a place built to symbolize trust and wealth. But today, it smells like smoke. A man in a tailored gray suit flicks open a silver lighter. The flame dances for a moment before catching paper. The $2.3 million check ignites instantly, curling into fire before the stunned eyes of onlookers. He holds it up, triumphant, as if burning proof of another man's worth could make him powerful. Marcus Wellington, the bank manager, smiles like a performer on stage. "Problem solved," he says to the crowd forming around him. Cell phones rise. A blonde woman whispers excitedly to her live stream audience as ash falls through the air like dark snow. Across from him stands David Williams, a quiet, middle-aged black man dressed in faded jeans and a gray hoodie. He doesn't move, doesn't speak, doesn't flinch. The flames die at his feet, leaving behind nothing but the smell of charred ink and humiliation. Marcus grinds his polished shoe into the ashes, twisting it slowly, staring down like he's crushing evidence of a crime. Customers murmur. A security guard speaks into his radio. The hum of business halts, replaced by the faint crackle of burning paper and the cold edge of judgment. Someone whispers, "Did he really burn it?" Another voice answers, "Yeah, he said it was fake." Marcus kicks at the ashes again, scattering the remains of the check that once held a fortune. "That's what happens when people try to fool us," he declares, voice loud enough for every camera to catch. "Fake money, fake name, fake everything." The phones keep recording. The crowd keeps watching. Online, the stream explodes, hundreds, then thousands tuning in to witness humiliation disguised as justice. "Savage manager," a comment flashes. Finally teaching scammers a lesson. The cruelty spreads faster than the smoke. But David remains still. His eyes, calm and unreadable, study the ashes on the floor like they hold a secret no one else can see. The more Marcus mocks him, the quieter David becomes, his silence heavier than words. Behind the counter, assistant manager Sarah Mitchell shifts uneasily. Something about the scene feels wrong. The man in the hoodie doesn't look desperate or guilty. He looks composed, controlled, as if he knows something no one else in the room does. The digital clock on the wall reads 2:48 p.m., 12 minutes until David's next meeting. He glances at it briefly, then at Marcus, then back to the ashes that used to be his check. There's no anger in his face. Just patience. Just time ticking forward. The crowd begins to whisper again. Is he going to say something? Why isn't he mad? Maybe he's scared. The live stream count climbs past 500, then 6, then 8. Marcus straightens his tie, basking in his small moment of viral fame. To him, this is victory. A man exposed, a scammer humiliated, a lesson delivered to his kind. The smell of smoke lingers. The marble gleams under the ashes. And through it all, David Williams stands motionless, a storm trapped in silence. He knows something no one else does. He knows what time it is. He knows what's about to happen when that clock strikes 3. And as Marcus Wellington soaks in applause from a crowd that mistakes cruelty for courage, he has no idea that the man he just humiliated owns everything around him. When the truth surfaces, who will be left standing? The man who burned the check or the man who wrote it? Keep watching. The smoke still lingers in the air, curling lazily upward as if the bank itself is exhaling shame. Customers whisper. Phones record. The marble floor, once pristine, now carries the gray fingerprints of arrogance, ashes pressed deep into the grain by Marcus Wellington's polished shoes. David Williams stands silently in the center of it all, the quietest man in a room that won't stop talking. His calm unnerves people. They expect outrage, an argument, a confrontation, but instead he watches. He observes every reaction, every judgment disguised as curiosity. The live stream camera catches his stillness. Thousands of strangers online call him weak for not fighting back, not realizing that restraint can be a weapon sharper than fury. The comments scroll faster than the smoke fades. He's just standing there. Must be guilty. Why isn't he saying anything? Savage manager, justice served. Sarah Mitchell, the assistant manager, shifts behind her desk, trying to steady her breathing. She's been at First National Bank for 6 years, and never has she seen Marcus so theatrical. He loves an audience, but this is different. There's a tremor under his confidence, a kind of desperate pride that feeds on humiliation. And it scares her. David glances toward the clock, 2:52 p.m., 10 minutes until his board meeting. His phone buzzes in his pocket, the vibration muted by his self-control. He knows who's calling, his executive assistant, probably wondering if he's en route. But he doesn't move. Not yet. Timing, he's learned, is everything. Marcus leans on the counter, basking in the glow of attention. "See that?" he announces to anyone who will listen. "That's how you handle fraud." He gestures to the ashes as though he's unveiling art. Fake checks, fake cards, fake identities, it all ends the same way. The crowd murmurs approval. A man in a suit whispers, "Good for him. About time someone stood up to these scammers." The elderly woman in the Chanel suit claps softly, her pearls gleaming under the bright light. "That's how you handle their kind," she says, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sarah's stomach turns. Their kind. She looks at David again, at the quiet man who hasn't said a word. He doesn't look like a con artist. His clothes might be simple, but his posture is straight, deliberate. There's something refined about him, something that doesn't match Marcus's story. Still, she says nothing. Fear of Marcus's temper holds her tongue. The power dynamics in this building are invisible but understood. The manager speaks, the staff obeys, and customers like David, well, they endure. The live stream count passes 1,000 viewers. The crowd thickens near the entrance. A few customers step forward, eager to film from closer angles. They want the perfect shot, the humiliation, the viral moment, the downfall of a man they don't even know. Marcus spots David's wallet in his jacket and snatches it before he can react. "Well, look what we have here," Marcus says, waving it like a prize. "Stolen, no doubt." He turns toward the crowd, smiling for the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got ourselves a full package, fraudulent checks and stolen property. A real entrepreneur of deception." Laughter ripples through the lobby, thin and uneasy. Even the security guard cracks a grin, trying to fit in with the mood. But David doesn't respond. His face remains composed, unreadable, like someone playing a game only he understands. He lifts his head slowly, meeting Marcus's gaze with quiet steadiness. "When the police arrive," he says softly, "you can explain to them where you really got it." The words hang in the air, simple but sharp. A few people in the crowd exchange uncertain glances. Sarah's heart skips. Something shifts, a fracture in Marcus's confidence. He forces a laugh, too loud, too forced. "Nice try, buddy. You won't be fooling anyone here." But his eyes flicker, just for a second, to David's watch, a gleaming Swiss timepiece that doesn't belong with faded denim. David lowers his gaze to the ashes again. Tiny fragments cling to his sneakers, black dust against white leather. It looks almost poetic, like evidence of something greater burning quietly beneath the surface. He doesn't see himself as a victim. Victims wait for help. He's waiting for truth. 2:55 p.m. The buzz of phones and quiet chatter fills the air. Sarah leans toward Marcus, whispering, "Maybe we should double-check the details before." "Quiet, Sarah," Marcus snaps, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I don't need second-guessing in my own branch." The crowd stiffens. Even the security guard looks uneasy. But Marcus continues, louder this time. "This is what happens when fraud meets vigilance. You see, people like him think they can walk in here with fake paper and fool hardworking Americans. Not on my watch. Hardworking Americans." The phrase echoes like a chant. The spectators nod, reaffirming their collective righteousness. But in the corner, the live streamer zooms closer on David's calm face. Her comments begin to shift. Why isn't he fighting back? He looks too calm for a scammer. Wait, what if this isn't what it seems? David glances toward the exit. He could walk out. He could leave the ashes behind and end this performance. But he doesn't. He's waiting for time, for silence, for the world to see what arrogance does when truth finally speaks. The marble floor shines beneath the overhead lights, a mirror for the entire scene. Pride on one side, patience on the other. The air hums with the tension of something about to break. 2:57 p.m. 3 minutes until everything changes. A second security guard jogs in, breathless, eyes darting between Marcus and the man accused of fraud. "What's happening here?" he asks. "Major scam attempt," Marcus declares proudly. "But don't worry, I handled it. Burned the fake check myself." The guard stares at the ashes, uncertain. "You burned it?" "That's right," Marcus says with a grin. "Problem solved." David's phone buzzes again. Urgent. Emergency board meeting. He silences it. The irony almost makes him smile. He's about to teach this room something it will never forget. And yet, even now, he feels no anger. Just sadness. Sadness for how easily people confuse power with worth. The clock on the wall clicks to 2:58. The live stream viewer count hits 1,500. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispers, "He's still standing there." They have no idea that the man they're filming isn't the story's victim. He's its author. 2:58 p.m. The tension in the air thickens like humidity before a storm. The marble lobby, once a stage for pride and prejudice, now hums with quiet unease. The spectators sense something coming, but don't know what. Their phones are still raised, their fingers still recording, but even the live streamers seem to feel that the story is shifting. Marcus Wellington, still basking in his self-made spotlight, can't see it. His arrogance blinds him. He straightens his silk tie and addresses his growing audience like a politician mid-speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," he says, gesturing toward the pile of ashes, "this is how we protect our community. We stand up to deception before it spreads." He doesn't notice Sarah's expression harden. He doesn't notice the way the security guard looks at David now, curious instead of suspicious. He doesn't notice the growing silence between the murmurs, the subtle change in energy, the way people stop nodding quite so fast. All he sees is the reflection of his own authority, bouncing off the glass walls like a mirror that flatters him. David checks his watch again. 2 minutes. Then 1. His calm begins to take on a different weight. It's not submission, it's patience. It's the kind of patience that comes from power so complete, it doesn't need to be announced. "Sir," the guard says softly, "maybe you should sit down while we wait for the police." "Of course," David replies evenly. He allows himself to be guided toward a leather chair near the window. His movements are measured, deliberate. Even sitting down, he somehow commands the room. The live streamer pans her camera to follow him, whispering commentary to thousands of viewers. He's way too calm. Something's off. Look at him. He's not scared. He's waiting. Marcus smirks and paces in front of the counter, like a man giving a lecture. "You see, this is the problem with modern society," he announces, raising his voice again. "Everyone wants shortcuts. No one wants to earn their success. And they think we won't notice when they try to cheat the system." Sarah folds her arms, silently studying David. She notices small details, the cut of his watch, the quality of his wallet, the confidence in a way he meets Marcus's eyes. Something inside her clicks. The pieces don't fit the picture Marcus painted. She tries again, quietly this time. "Marcus, maybe we should just confirm his identity before." He cuts her off sharply, without even looking at her. "Not another word, Sarah. I know a scammer when I see one." The blonde live streamer zooms in again. Her chat fills with divided opinions. This manager's too proud. The guy's too calm. Something crazy's about to happen. I can feel it. 2:59 p.m. 1 minute before everything changes. David looks up from his watch, then to Marcus, who's still monologuing to his audience about integrity and vigilance. There's almost pity in his eyes. For a moment, he feels sorry for the man, sorry for the blindness that pride can bring. But pity won't stop what's coming. Marcus gestures toward him again. "This is what happens when arrogance meets reality," he says, his voice swelling with performative authority. "You come into my establishment thinking you can fool." David stands up slowly. The movement slices through Marcus's speech like a blade through silence. All eyes turn toward him. The air itself seems to pause. He reaches into his jacket pocket. The guards tense immediately. "Sir, stay seated," one says, his hand twitching near his belt. But David ignores them. His expression doesn't change. His voice remains calm. "I really do need to take this call," he says, glancing at his phone's glowing screen. "It's quite important." Marcus laughs harshly, misunderstanding completely. "Oh, of course. Your partner in crime can wait, can't they? You're not going anywhere until the police arrive." David's gaze shifts toward him, slow and deliberate. "You're right," he says softly. "I'm not going anywhere." The crowd murmurs. The live stream viewer count jumps again, 2,000 now, maybe more. The comments come faster than they can be read. Something's happening. He's about to flip the script. This just got real. And in that quiet second before the clock hits 3 o'clock, Sarah feels her pulse quicken. Her intuition screams that the narrative is about to reverse. The clock ticks. 3 p.m. David reaches into his jacket once more, but this time not for his phone. Instead, he pulls out a single white business card. Simple. Unassuming. He places it gently on the marble counter beside the ashes of his burned check. The gesture is small, but the energy in the room changes completely. It's as if gravity itself has shifted. Marcus frowns, confused. "What's that supposed to be?" he asks, his bravado starting to crack. The security guard leans closer, squinting at the print. His face drains of color. He steps back instinctively, the way someone might from a sudden explosion. Sarah leans forward, reading the text, her eyes widen in disbelief. David Williams, Chairman and CEO, Williams Capital Group. For a moment, no one breathes. The words hang there, suspended in air, louder than any accusation. The live stream camera zooms in on the card, and the chat erupts in chaos. Wait, what? He owns the bank? This can't be real. Oh my God, this man actually runs the place. Marcus laughs nervously, the sound brittle and hollow. Nice try, he mutters. Anyone can print a fake business card. You think that's going to fool me? But no one's laughing with him anymore. David reaches calmly into his jacket again and retrieves a sleek black tablet. His fingers move across the screen with quiet confidence. The bank's internal board member portal opens, something no ordinary customer would ever have access to. He logs in effortlessly, and within seconds, his credentials appear on the screen. David Williams, principal shareholder, 73% ownership stake, chairman of the board of directors. The silence that follows is unbearable. Even the air conditioning hums quieter. Sarah's hand flies to her mouth. The crowd steps back instinctively, as if proximity might implicate them in Marcus's downfall. The live stream's view count skyrockets, and the chat explodes. Marcus Wellington stands frozen, his perfect tie suddenly feeling like a noose. The confidence that once filled the room drains through the marble floor, leaving behind only dread. David doesn't gloat. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply looks at Marcus with that same calm he's held since the beginning. "Now," he says quietly, "shall we continue this conversation professionally?" The words slice through the silence like glass breaking. For the first time, Marcus has nothing to say. The man who just minutes ago performed for an audience can now barely breathe under the weight of his own humiliation. The cameras keep rolling. The crowd stares in disbelief. The digital clock on the wall blinks to 3:01 p.m. The man they thought was powerless has just revealed he holds all the power there is. The world inside the bank freezes. Every camera lens focuses on the man who has just changed the story. The phones that once mocked him now tremble in their owner's hands. The live stream's audio crackles with collective disbelief, an entire digital audience holding its breath. David Williams stands in quiet command, his tablet glowing faint blue in the cold light. The proof is undeniable. His name, his title, his ownership, displayed in crisp, corporate clarity. There's no performance, no theatrics. Just truth, plain and devastating. Marcus Wellington's mouth opens, then closes. His eyes dart from the tablet to the crowd, then back to the ashes at his feet. This can't be right, he stammers. This is fake. His voice cracks on the last word. Sarah steps forward slowly, the color draining from her face. "Marcus," she says quietly, "it's the real board portal. That's the internal interface. I've only seen that once during a corporate audit. He's not lying." The sentence lands like a thunderclap. The last fragments of Marcus's confidence crumble. His silver lighter, the symbol of his arrogance, slips from his hand and clatters onto the marble floor. The sound echoes through the hushed lobby like the drop of a gavel. David watches it roll to a stop near his shoe. Then, almost gently, he places his foot over it, the same way Marcus had crushed his burning check minutes earlier. The symbolism is lost on no one. The live streamer's voice shakes as she narrates, "Oh my God, he owns the bank. The guy they just humiliated, he literally owns this place." Her camera pans between the men, capturing the collapse of arrogance in real time. David's tone remains calm, but there's a gravity to his words that makes everyone listen. "Mr. Wellington," he says, "you've made some strong assumptions today. Would you like to revisit them?" Marcus swallows hard, sweat beading along his hairline. "Sir, I didn't realize." "That much is obvious," David interrupts gently. His calmness cuts deeper than anger could. "What you did wasn't just unprofessional. It was inhumane. You burned evidence of my worth in front of witnesses because you couldn't imagine someone like me deserving respect." A ripple moves through the crowd. The same people who once cheered Marcus's justice now can't meet David's eyes. The elderly woman who applauded his cruelty clutches her handbag tighter, as though she could hide behind it. The businessman who had called for stronger action against scammers lowers his phone, shame spreading across his face. Sarah takes a small step closer to David, her voice trembling. Mr. Williams, we truly didn't know. He raises a hand slightly, stopping her apology mid-sentence. I'm aware you didn't. That's the point. The stillness stretches. Outside the glass walls, traffic moves, life continues, but inside, time feels suspended between judgment and consequence. Even the buzzing of the overhead lights seems quieter, as if the building itself is listening. Marcus stumbles over his own words, trying to salvage control. You have to understand, sir. I was protecting the bank. You came in here dressed like, he stops himself, realizing too late how that sentence ends. David finishes it for him, voice steady. Like someone beneath you. Marcus looks at the floor. His reflection in the polished marble stares back, a man stripped bare of his illusions. David turns his tablet toward him, the glowing display filling the space between them like a mirror of truth. I've invested hundreds of millions into this institution, he says quietly. I own 73% of its shares. That check you burned wasn't fake, it was my quarterly dividend. The room exhales as one. A few people gasp audibly. The live stream's chat floods faster than the servers can display it. He burned his boss's check. This is unreal. Racist manager just torched his CEO's money. Marcus's knees weaken. I didn't know, he whispers. That's exactly the problem, David replies. You didn't know. You didn't ask. You assumed. The cameras keep rolling. Somewhere, a notification sound pings. A live stream clip has gone viral. The internet is already dissecting the moment, spreading it beyond the marble walls of First National Bank. David walks slowly toward the counter, his voice even. When you burned that check, Marcus, you didn't just destroy paper. You destroyed dignity. You demonstrated exactly why institutions like this struggle with trust. The silence is suffocating now. Sarah stands frozen behind the counter, eyes wide, mind racing between horror and awe. The two security guards shift uncomfortably, no longer sure whom they're supposed to protect. Marcus clings to the last scraps of denial. This has to be some misunderstanding. You can't expect me to believe. I don't expect belief, David says calmly. I expect accountability. He taps the screen once, opening the bank's internal employee directory. The interface flashes blue, then lists personnel by name, title, and ID. With a single swipe, he scrolls until a familiar name appears. Marcus Wellington, branch manager, downtown Chicago, employee ID 4847. Annual salary, $127,000. Hired, March 2018. Performance rating, satisfactory. The crowd leans forward as he reads aloud, each word an iron weight. You've been working for me for 6 years and 8 months, David says, his voice low, deliberate. 6 years of serving this institution under my ownership. 6 years of taking pride in a company built on equity and inclusion, principles you violated the moment you struck that lighter. The second security guard steps back slightly, the realization settling in. The live streamer whispers, he's reading his whole life off that screen. This is brutal. Marcus's skin goes pale. His hands tremble. Mr. Williams, please, he manages. I was only trying to follow protocol. David looks up, expression unreadable. Protocol. His tone is quiet, but cuts like ice. Is it protocol to burn evidence? To publicly humiliate a customer based on appearance? To accuse without proof? Because if that's company policy, I need to review the entire handbook. No one speaks. Sarah lowers her head, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. The shame in the room becomes tangible, thick enough to touch. The live stream viewer count surges past 3,000. Comments flood every second. This is justice. He's too calm, it's terrifying. The CEO just dismantled him live. David closes the personnel file and straightens his posture. His composure commands absolute silence. This isn't about revenge, he says softly. This is about recognition. Every person in this room, every viewer watching online, needs to understand how easily dignity is burned away by bias. He turns his attention to the crowd. Eyes meet his, then dart away. Every spectator who once laughed now feels complicit in the crime. The marble, the lights, even the air feels heavy with guilt. David walks slowly toward the counter where his check once turned to ash. The fragments lie scattered, fragile and gray. He kneels, picks up a piece between his fingers, and studies it under the fluorescent light. The ash stains his skin faintly black. $2,347,000, he says quietly, turning the fragment over in his palm. But this, he lifts his hand, showing the ashes, this is worth much more. because it shows us exactly what judgment costs. Marcus's throat tightens. His eyes water, not from sympathy, but from the crushing weight of realization. The man he thought powerless now holds every thread of his career, his reputation, his life. The second security guard lowers his head. Even he can't meet David's gaze. David straightens and dusts the ash from his hand. You wanted to make an example of me, Marcus. Now, the world is watching you instead. The clock ticks past 3:03. The crowd doesn't move. The live stream chat floods with fire emojis, shock, disbelief, and one unifying word, justice. And then, David takes a slow step closer. His tone drops to something colder, measured, deliberate, judicial. Tell me, he says, looking Marcus in the eye, what exactly do you think happens next? EAD. Even he can't meet David's gaze. David stands tall again, dusting the ashes from his fingers as if closing a chapter. Let's take a moment, he says, his tone low, but commanding. A moment to appreciate how quickly perception can turn into persecution. He looks around the room, the marble counters, the glass walls, the frozen faces. Everyone in this building saw what happened. Some of you filmed it. Some of you cheered. None of you stopped it. His eyes pass over the elderly woman, the businessman, the teenager still holding her phone midair. Do you understand what that says about us? About what we've become? The question hangs heavy, unanswered. The only sound is the faint hum of the air conditioner and the buzz of hundreds of notifications exploding on the live stream. Marcus's voice trembles. Sir, please. I didn't mean. David's gaze pierces him. You didn't mean to burn it, he asks quietly. Or you didn't mean to get caught burning it. Marcus flinches, his composure dissolving. I thought it was fake. I swear to you. You thought it was fake because I was the one holding it, David interrupts softly. His words fall like weights, each one measured and precise. You didn't see me. You saw your assumptions. He turns slightly, addressing the entire lobby now. Every one of you saw me standing here and decided who I was before I said a single word. My clothes, my skin, my quietness. You thought they told you everything you needed to know. The live streamer whispers into her mic. He's not just talking to them, he's talking to all of us. Thousands of viewers type the same thing in the chat. This is bigger than the bank. David moves toward the marble counter again, standing beside the pile of ash, as if reclaiming it. Mr. Wellington, he says, you burned a check worth more than your annual salary 20 times over. You did it proudly, publicly, with an audience cheering. And now, that same audience will witness what real accountability looks like. Marcus's lips tremble. Please, Mr. Williams, I made a mistake. I was doing my job. David studies him for a long, heavy moment. The entire room holds its breath. No, he says finally, voice soft but immovable. You were doing your judgment. Sarah steps forward now, unable to stay silent any longer. Mr. Williams, she says gently, what happens now? David looks at her. For a moment, something human flickers in his eyes. Disappointment, not anger. What happens now, he says, is what should have happened from the start, truth. He taps the tablet again, the screen shifting to the bank's internal security footage. Instantly, the large wall monitors behind the counter flicker to life. Multiple camera angles replay the scene that just unfolded, the burning, the laughter, the humiliation. Every second of it is crystal clear. The crowd watches in horror as they see themselves, applauding, filming, standing by. The elderly woman gasps when her own voice echoes through the speakers. That's how you handle their kind. Her eyes fill with tears. David lets the footage play for 10 silent seconds before pausing it. This is what bias looks like in real time, he says quietly. And this is what it costs to ignore it. Marcus stares at the screen, jaw slack, as the evidence of his cruelty loops behind him. He tries to speak, but no words come. The live stream chat explodes. This is insane. He's showing the receipts. This is what racism looks like in 4K. David turns off the screen and closes the tablet. Mr. Wellington, he says, you've spent years thinking power comes from position. But today, you'll learn it comes from principle. The weight of his words presses into every corner of the room. Even the security guards look humbled now, their earlier hostility replaced with quiet shame. Marcus tries one last time to plead his case. Sir, please. I have a family. I can fix this. David's calm expression doesn't waver. Fix it, he repeats softly. Can you unburn the check? Can you erase the humiliation? Can you undo what you've taught everyone here to think is acceptable? Marcus's mouth opens, but no answer comes. The silence is his only confession. David steps closer, lowering his voice so only Marcus can hear, but the microphones on the live stream catch every word. You burned my worth because you couldn't see it. Now you'll face the fire of your own actions. The digital clock above the counter clicks to 3:07 p.m. David turns to the crowd again. For those still watching, inside this bank and around the world, remember this moment. Bias doesn't always wear a uniform or carry a weapon. Sometimes it wears a suit and calls itself professional. He looks down at the ashes one last time, then back up at Marcus. I didn't come here to expose anyone. I came here to cash a check. You created this stage. You lit the fire. I just made sure the world could see what really illuminated. Marcus's body seems to shrink under the fluorescent light. His authority, his pride, his sense of superiority, all of it burns away in silence. Behind him, Sarah wipes her eyes, the truth of the moment cutting deeper than any reprimand could. The live stream count passes 4,000. News outlets begin to comment in real time. #BankBurnsCheck trends across platforms. The footage will be replayed, dissected, and shared for weeks to come, but no one in that room knows it yet. David finally turns toward the security guards, his voice composed again. Gentlemen, there's no need to wait for the police. This matter is internal now. Both guards hesitate, then nod slowly, unsure whether to salute or apologize. The power dynamic has flipped completely. The man they once saw as a suspect now commands the entire room with nothing but quiet authority. Marcus takes a hesitant step forward. Mr. Williams, what happens to me? David's expression hardens. That depends on what kind of man you decide to be when the cameras stop rolling. The sentence lands with the force of a verdict. Marcus lowers his head. Around him, the spectators begin to drift away, ashamed to meet his eyes, or David's. The crowd that once fed on humiliation now starves on guilt. David watches them go, saying nothing. When the last customer leaves, the bank feels larger, emptier. Only the hum of electronics and the smell of smoke remain. He looks at Marcus one last time, voice low but resonant. You wanted the world to see a fraud. Congratulations. You just showed them one. The clock reads 3:09. The live stream fades to silence. Outside, the city moves as if nothing happened. But inside those walls, everything has changed. And for Marcus Wellington, the real reckoning hasn't even begun. The news spreads like wildfire. Within minutes, the clip of the burned check and David's quiet revelation floods every screen from Chicago to New York. Outside, news vans swarm the block, cameras flash against the glass facade of the bank, and strangers press their faces to the windows, desperate to see the man who turned humiliation into history. Inside, the marble floor reflects not chaos, but reckoning. David Williams stands still, the calm in the storm he never asked for. The glow of his tablet dims as he sets it down, his reflection merging with the polished surface. Around him, silence reigns, an oppressive, electric silence that vibrates with guilt and disbelief. Every second feels heavier than the last, thick with the weight of truth. Marcus Wellington leans on the counter, pale and trembling. The power that once rolled off him like heat has vanished. He looks smaller now, diminished, almost childlike, trapped between apology and panic. His voice cracks as he tries to form words. Mr. Williams, please. David doesn't move. His eyes lock on Marcus, not with anger but with something deeper, something that makes a room feel colder. You burned more than a check, Marcus, he says softly. You burned a bridge to every man who looks like me and dares to walk into a bank believing he'll be treated fairly. The sentence lands like thunder. Even the live streamer lowers her camera for a moment, trembling. The audience online is no longer cheering, they're quiet. Some are crying. Some are angry. All are watching. David turns toward the massive wall monitor and connects his tablet. In seconds, the bank's digital dashboard fills the screen. Transaction logs, equity records, and camera feeds flicker in front of everyone. He selects one, Employee Conduct Review. A series of clips plays in silence, moments Marcus thought no one noticed. His smirk at a customer who struggled with English. His eye roll when a janitor passed by. His whisper to a coworker about a client who looks out of place. Every careless bias, every microaggression captured, time-stamped, and recorded in the system for training purposes. The crowd gasps. The footage is undeniable. Marcus's face drains of color. Where did you? How? This is my bank, David says simply. I built it to protect people from discrimination, to give dignity where the world denies it. I installed these systems myself. He looks at Marcus again. And yet, here we are. The air grows heavier, the tension almost unbearable. The camera flashes outside blur against the glass like lightning. Sarah, tears in her eyes, whispers, "Sir, maybe we should." David's voice cuts through the air, calm and certain. "No, Ms. Patel. This needs to be seen." He turns to the employees behind the counter. "Every one of you has been told what this institution stands for. Equity, humanity, respect. Not charity, not pity, respect. But words mean nothing if action dies in the hands of prejudice." The silence that follows is like a confession. David steps closer Marcus, his tone low and precise. "Tell me, when you saw me walk in, what did you see?" Marcus's voice breaks. "A man trying to cash a fake check." "No," David says, shaking his head. "You saw a threat. You saw color before character. You saw someone you believed didn't belong." He takes another step forward. The crowd instinctively moves back, creating a circle around the two men, one powerful, one powerless, though no one's sure which is which anymore. David points to the smoldering ashes still lying on the marble floor. "That is what your judgment does. That is what this world's prejudice looks like when it catches fire." The words echo through the lobby, bouncing off the glass walls like the toll of a bell. Marcus drops his gaze, voice cracking under the pressure. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." David studies him for a moment, then looks toward the live stream camera, as if speaking to everyone watching. They never do. Outside, thunder rumbles in the distance. The weather shifts, as if the city itself senses the weight of what's happening. He turns back to Marcus. "Do you know what it feels like to walk into a place you built and be treated like a trespasser?" His voice trembles slightly now, emotion breaking through the calm. "To hand over proof of your own success and watch someone burn it because they can't imagine you earned it." Marcus shakes his head, eyes wide with regret. I can't imagine that, no." "That's because you've never had to," David replies quietly. The crowd listens in silence, the tension holding them in place like invisible chains. David gestures toward the cameras, his voice rising, gaining power with every word. Every person of color watching this knows that feeling. They've lived it in banks, in offices, in classrooms. They've been second-guessed, stared down, and silenced. And when they protest, they're told to calm down, to be polite, to prove their worth all over again. His words hit like waves, relentless and true. You think this is one man's mistake? No. This is centuries of conditioning, baked into systems, dressed in professionalism, hidden behind policies and smiles. A tear escapes Sarah's eye. She wipes it quickly, ashamed of her silence earlier. David's voice lowers again, steady but laced with pain. "I built this bank to be different, to show what integrity looks like in practice. But you, Marcus, you turned it into every room I've ever been excluded from." Marcus's knees buckle slightly. He grips the edge of the counter for balance. The live stream chat floods. This is history. He's speaking for all of us. This is the realest thing I've ever heard. David breathes deeply, his calm returning like the eye of a storm. "You see, Marcus, I don't need to fire you. I don't need to ruin your career. You've already done that yourself. But I do need you and everyone watching to understand the difference between power and worth. Power can be taken. Worth cannot." The line hits hard. Even the security guards bow their heads slightly. David glances down at the ashes again, then back up at Marcus. "You tried to erase my worth in front of the world. But you just made sure the world saw it clearer than ever." Marcus sinks into a chair behind the counter, shaking. The crowd watches in silence as David takes a slow breath, steadies himself, and finally says, "There will be consequences. Not from me, but from truth itself. Because truth has a way of finding those who deny it." The clock on the wall clicks to 3:15. And then the automatic doors slide open. Two men in dark suits enter, badges gleaming under the lights. The chatter dies instantly. The atmosphere tightens again. One of the men speaks. "Mr. Williams, corporate headquarters, sent us. We received the feed." Marcus looks up, terrified. "Wait, you've seen this?" The man nods grimly. "Every board member has." The second man steps forward and places a sealed envelope on the counter. The logo reads First National Bank of America, Executive Review Committee. David doesn't touch it. "I assume you know what's inside," he says quietly. The man nods again. Effective immediately, Mr. Wellington's employment has been suspended pending formal termination review. And, Mr. Williams, the board requests your presence tonight for an emergency session. Marcus's face turns ghost white. His career, his identity, has collapsed in less than an hour. David takes the envelope gently, sets it aside, and looks Marcus in the eyes one final time. Actions have echoes, he says. Yours will be heard long after today. The officers turn to leave. Outside, the rain begins to fall against the glass in heavy, rhythmic drops. David stands motionless, staring at the reflection of the storm. Funny, he murmurs softly, mostly to himself. Even the sky knows when to weep. The thunder outside swells louder, shaking the windows. Inside, no one speaks. And then David turns back toward the crowd. His face, usually so composed, finally cracks, just slightly, as the weight of everything crashes over him. I shouldn't have to own a place to be respected in it, he says. The line pierces the air like lightning. Every head bows. The screen behind him still glows with his credentials, his name, his power. But in that moment, none of it feels like victory, only truth, raw and unfiltered. The live stream count surges again, 5,000, then 6, then 10. The world outside watches, transfixed. And as the thunder rolls above the city, David Williams takes a single, steady breath. Because the real storm is just beginning. The crowd, his face half lit by the storm outside. Every flash of lightning through the tall glass walls seems to mirror the fury he's fought so long to hide. His voice, when he finally speaks, trembles, not from fear, but from the unbearable truth pressing through him. I spent years believing that if I worked hard enough, if I built something honest enough, the world would stop seeing me as a threat, he says slowly. But today proved that no amount of success can buy freedom from perception. The crowd listens in absolute silence. The live stream comments blur into an endless flood. Hearts, tears, fists raised, disbelief. David turns his gaze toward the camera again, as though speaking directly to millions now, watching worldwide. They told me once that dignity couldn't be destroyed. But I've learned it can be burned if you let others decide what it's worth. He looks down at the ashes again. They're soaked now, tiny black flecks melting into the marble as raindrops slip through the cracked entrance where the wind has forced its way inside. He kneels and presses his palm to the wet surface, smearing the ashes into a faint gray mark. His reflection ripples in the sheen of water and soot. This, he whispers, is what we do to each other. We burn what we fear. We destroy what we don't understand. And we justify it with words like policy and protocol. Sarah steps forward, tears streaking her cheeks. Mr. Williams, she begins, but he lifts a hand gently. Don't, he says quietly. This isn't about me anymore. It never was. It's about every man and woman who's ever been told they don't belong in a place they helped build. The glass door rattles under the wind. Outside, thunder echoes across the city like a drumbeat. David straightens, turning his back to Marcus, and facing the staff and crowd that still linger, half in shame, half in awe. You all watched, he says, and in your silence you chose sides. But understand this, silence is not neutral. It's permission. The words slice through the room like shards of glass. A man in the corner, a customer who earlier had recorded the scene, lowers his head, tears welling in his eyes. Marcus still sits slumped in a chair, his face buried in his hands. His voice emerges in fragments. I never thought it would end like this. David's tone softens, though the weight of his conviction remains. It didn't end, Marcus. It began. This is the beginning of your understanding, and the end of my tolerance. Lightning flashes, briefly illuminating them both in white light, the oppressor and the oppressed, bound together by truth neither can escape. The corporate officers who delivered the envelope remain by the door, waiting. One of them clears his throat and says quietly, Sir, there's press outside. They're asking if you'll make a statement. David's gaze stays fixed on the horizon beyond the storm. They already have my statement, he says. They've been watching it unfold in real time. The officer nods and steps aside. But instead of leaving, David walks toward the main glass doors. The automatic sensors trigger, and the doors glide open. A gust of cold, rain-laced wind rushes in, scattering papers, rattling signs. The crowd instinctively backs away from the chill. David steps just beyond the threshold, into the drizzle. The sky above Chicago is bruised purple, streaked with lightning veins that illuminate the skyline. Cameras flash from every direction. Microphones rise like a forest of metal stems. He doesn't flinch. He raises his head, letting the rain hit his face, water mixing with the ash still smeared on his skin. "This isn't a story about money," he says to the sea of reporters. "It's about worth. It's about how quickly the world decides who deserves to be believed. A man like me can own the building, but still be treated like he doesn't belong in it. That's not an accident, it's design." The reporters fall silent. Raindrops ping against microphones, every word caught between thunderclaps. "I built this institution to prove that equality wasn't just a promise, it was policy," David continues. "And yet, even inside these walls, prejudice found its way in. Maybe that's the lesson. You can build the walls, write the rules, sign the checks, but you can't legislate humanity. That has to live in people." For a moment, his voice cracks. The vulnerability beneath the authority shows, a glimpse of the man behind the legend. "I'm tired," he admits softly. "Tired of pretending patience is progress. Tired of turning pain into lessons for those who should already know better." He looks directly into the nearest camera. "To anyone watching, especially those who've been made to feel small, invisible, unworthy, know this: you are the check they can't burn. You are the proof they can't erase." The crowd outside erupts in applause. People in the street raise their phones, some crying, some cheering, all witnessing the moment turn from humiliation into empowerment. Marcus watches from inside through the glass, face streaked with tears. In that reflection, David outside in the rain, Marcus inside in the cold fluorescent light, lies a contrast too clear to ignore. One man cleansed, one condemned. David lowers his head slightly and turns back to the crowd. "Maybe now they'll understand," he murmurs, more to himself than anyone else. As he walks back inside, dripping rain onto the marble floor, the cameras flash behind him like distant lightning fading into memory. Sarah approaches, voice trembling. "Mr. Williams, the board is waiting for you. Should I prepare a car?" He pauses. "No, I'll walk." "Sir, it's raining." "Let it," he says quietly. "Some things need to be washed away." He walks past Marcus without another glance. The manager's trembling hands clutch the envelope that seals his fate. His sobs are almost silent, lost beneath the rhythm of rain. David reaches the lobby doors again, looks back once at the people who remain, and says, "Change starts when silence ends. Today we end it." He steps out into the storm completely. The cameras follow him until he disappears into the city haze. The glass doors close behind him with a hiss, and inside, the bank remains, bright, sterile, and forever marked by what happened there. In the reflection of the marble floor, the ash stain still lingers, faint but permanent. A reminder, a scar. And as the thunder fades, one final thought hangs in the air, unspoken yet undeniable. He walked in to cash a check. He walked out having cashed his soul's worth. Days pass, but the echo of that storm doesn't fade. What happened inside that glass and marble bank becomes more than a local headline. It becomes a mirror the nation can't look away from. Every network runs the footage, every article dissects it frame by frame, and every conversation circles back to one question that pierces deeper than scandal or policy. How could something like this still happen? In offices, people whisper. In living rooms, families debate. In classrooms, teachers pause lessons to discuss it. The viral clip has become a lesson in itself, a raw confrontation with the biases so many would rather deny. But for David Williams, the man at the center of it all, silence becomes his companion once again. He doesn't do interviews. He doesn't issue statements. He lets the truth speak for itself. The morning after the incident, he walks through the same streets that had once watched him disappear into the storm. Now strangers stop him, some with tears, others with gratitude, some just staring in quiet awe. They don't see a CEO. They see something far rarer, a man who stood still in the face of fire and made the world stop to watch its own reflection. He stops at a small cafe he's visited for years, one of the few places where no one ever treated him differently. The barista, a young woman with kind eyes, looks up as he enters. She doesn't ask about the news or the cameras. She just says, "Black coffee, Mr. Williams?" He nods. For a moment, that simple exchange, the absence of judgment, feels heavier than all the headlines. Outside, the city moves around him as if waking from a long sleep. Posters appear on walls. Respect is not a privilege. Hashtags fill timelines. Hashtag the check burned. Hashtag see the man. Hashtag truth in ashes. People are arguing, learning, changing, but slowly, painfully. The world is processing what it saw, and in that reflection, a wound has reopened. At corporate headquarters, the boardroom is heavy with tension. Every seat is filled, every voice hushed as David enters. The same men and women who once doubted his leadership now watch him like witnesses at a trial, except he's no defendant. He's the embodiment of the truth they've built their brand to represent. The chairman clears his throat, his tone cautious. "David," he begins, "we owe you an apology." David simply nods, his gaze steady. "An apology isn't what's needed," he says. "Change is." He takes his place at the head of the table, not as a man reclaiming power, but as one redistributing it. "From this day forward," he continues, "we don't just talk about equity. We audit it. We don't just promote diversity. We protect it. Every branch, every policy, every face that represents this institution will reflect the values we claim to stand for." The board members nod slowly, some in agreement, some in discomfort. David leans forward. "And it won't end here. We'll establish a foundation for those who've been denied financial dignity because of bias, no matter how subtle, no matter how systemic." His words aren't fiery. They're deliberate, unshakable, spoken by a man who's carried too much silence for too long. Weeks turn into months. The footage doesn't fade, it evolves. Documentaries reference it. Universities study it. Activists quote it. The moment when one man's humiliation became a movement begins shaping how institutions confront their own reflection. But for David, change isn't about fame, it's about repair. He visits the downtown branch one final time. The marble floors have been polished, the walls repainted, but the ghost of that day lingers in the air. A new manager greets him, a black woman in her 40s, confident, compassionate, chosen not as a symbol, but as a standard. "We've implemented every new measure," she tells him. "And people talk differently now. They think before they act." David smiles faintly. "That's all I ever wanted." As he walks through the lobby, he pauses where the ashes once lay. The marble is spotless now, but under the right light, a faint gray discoloration remains, a shadow only he can see. He kneels and places his hand over it, as if touching a memory. "You taught the world something," he whispers. "Not about me, but about itself." He rises and turns toward the window. Outside, the city glows with afternoon light, clean, bright, renewed. The storm has passed, but its lessons have not. Across social media, snippets of his speech still circulate. The moment he said silence is permission, the look on Marcus's face, the sound of rain against the glass. But what no camera caught was this, the quiet aftermath, the soft rebuilding, the way pain turns to purpose when carried with grace. In time, David's foundation, the Worth Initiative, begins to grow. It funds scholarships, supports minority entrepreneurs, and trains institutions in anti-bias education. Branches across the country adopt new transparency policies. And slowly, one conversation at a time, the flame that once burned his check begins lighting the way for others. Marcus Wellington's name disappears from the headlines. But one day, months later, a letter arrives at David's office, handwritten, unmarked, the ink shaky but sincere. He opens it and reads, "Mr. Williams, there isn't a day that passes when I don't replay that moment. I've lost my job, my home, and much of what I thought defined me. But what I've gained is the one thing I never knew I needed, awareness. I used to think racism was something only monsters carried. Now I understand it's something that hides in silence, pride, and comfort. You didn't destroy me that day. You exposed me, and I'm grateful you did. I'm working at a community outreach program now. Maybe someday I'll be worthy enough to thank you in person. Marcus Wellington." David reads the letter twice, then folds it carefully and places it in his desk drawer, not as a reminder of vengeance, but of redemption. Because even in the ashes of wrongdoing, there can still be growth. That night, he walks along the Chicago River. The city hums around him, alive and endless. Reflections of streetlights ripple across the water like threads of gold. He watches them and thinks about the check, how something meant to measure value ended up redefining it. He whispers to himself, maybe that's what justice really looks like. Not punishment, awareness. The wind carries the words away. Somewhere in the distance, a street performer plays a slow, mournful tune on a saxophone. The sound blends with the rhythm of passing trains, the echo of footsteps, and the pulse of a city still learning. And as he stands there, hands in his pockets, the world finally feels still again, not because it's healed, but because it's listening. Oh, himself, Maybe that's what justice really looks like. Not punishment. Awareness. He lingers by the railing, watching the water slide beneath the bridge, its surface fractured by ripples and light. The reflection of the skyline wavers, shimmering like a city built on uncertainty, but beneath it, the current never stops moving forward. David realizes that this, too, is what progress looks like. Uneven, imperfect, relentless. The next morning, his inbox fills with messages, some from leaders, others from strangers. One reads, "You gave us language for what we've been living." Another simply says, "Thank you for not yelling. You made them listen." But one, from a teacher in Atlanta, captures the heart of it all. "My students watched your story. They asked me why the world needed a storm to see a man's worth. I didn't have an answer. But now they do." He leans back in his chair, staring out the window at the sunlight spilling over the city's rooftops. The light feels different now, not softer but truer. He knows the work isn't done. It never will be. But the silence that once smothered truth has been broken. Weeks later, at an awards gala honoring social impact leaders, David is invited to speak. The room gleams with chandeliers and silver cutlery, a setting built for comfort and status. Yet when he steps to the podium, there's no pretense, no grandeur, only that same quiet composure that once silenced a lobby full of prejudice. He begins simply, "The world doesn't change because of outrage. It changes because of recognition. Recognition of pain. Recognition of worth. Recognition of how easily we forget both." The audience listens, rapt. "They say time heals," he continues, "but time doesn't heal what we refuse to acknowledge. Healing comes from the courage to see the wound, to admit we caused it, and to choose differently next time." Applause ripples through the room. Some people rise to their feet. But David doesn't smile. He looks down for a moment, collecting himself, then says softly, "I'm not proud of what happened that day. I'm proud of what came after. Not the fame, not the policies, but the reflection. Because reflection is where change begins." Later, as he leaves the event, he steps into the cool night air. Across the street, a group of young activists wave small placards that read, "Value has no color." When they spot him, they cheer, but David lifts a hand gently, humbly, as if to say, "Don't cheer for me. Cheer for yourselves." Months turn into a year. The bank, once the epicenter of shame, now becomes a symbol of reform. Training programs spread nationwide. Other companies follow suit. The words "financial dignity" begin appearing in policy documents and mission statements. But the real change is quieter, less visible, more human. A teller who takes a moment to listen. A manager who asks before assuming. A stranger who speaks up when silence feels safer. And every time the story resurfaces online, someone new finds it. A young black entrepreneur on the verge of giving up. A white banker rethinking his own habits. A student learning that history isn't only written in textbooks, it's lived, one decision at a time. David still walks the same streets, still stops for coffee at the same cafe. But now, when people recognize him, it isn't with pity or reverence, it's with acknowledgement. They meet his eyes. They nod. They see him. One afternoon, as he exits the cafe, a young boy approaches, no older than 10, his school backpack nearly swallowing him whole. He looks nervous, clutching a folded paper. "Mr. Williams," he says shyly, "my teacher showed us your video. I drew you something." He unfolds the paper, a crayon drawing of a man standing in front of a big glass building, rain falling all around him, his reflection shining brighter than the storm. At the bottom, the boy has written in shaky letters. He didn't yell. He just showed them. David smiles, kneeling to meet the boy's eyes. "That's beautiful," he says. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" The boy hesitates, then answers softly, someone who doesn't need to prove he belongs. David's smile falters, the weight of the answer catching in his chest. "You already are," he says. When the boy leaves, David looks up at the skyline again, the same skyline that once watched him walk into a storm. But this time, it feels brighter, lighter, changed. The next day, he meets with his team at the Worth Initiative. They're developing new programs for schools and corporations, turning his story into a national model for bias awareness and empathy training. As they discuss the next campaign, one of the team members, a young intern, asks, "Mr. Williams, do you ever regret what happened that day?" He pauses, considering the question. "Regret," he repeats. "No. Pain, yes. But not regret. That day burned something away, and what's left is truth. And truth," he says with quiet conviction, "is always worth the fire." The team nods, inspired. The meeting continues, filled with ideas and hope. But David's thoughts drift for a moment, back to the marble floor, the ashes, the rain. He realizes he's no longer haunted by them. They've become his reminder of what must never be forgotten. That evening, he records a message for a global conference on racial equity. The video is simple, no stage, no spotlight, just David seated by his office window as the sunset pours gold across his desk. He says, the hardest part of change isn't seeing injustice. It's seeing ourselves in it. We all like to believe we're the hero in someone else's story. But maybe real heroism begins when we admit how often we've been the silence that allowed harm to live. He leans closer to the camera. So ask yourself, not what you would have done if you were in that bank, but what you're doing now, wherever you stand. Because injustice doesn't always burn. Sometimes it smiles at you across a counter. The message goes viral overnight, spreading far beyond finance or race. It becomes a call to conscience. By the following spring, the Worth Initiative funds its 1,000 project. Schools across America dedicate lessons to empathy, bias, and equality. On the anniversary of the incident, David stands once more at the steps of the bank. The sky is clear this time, the glass gleaming in the sunlight. People gather not for protest, but for remembrance. He takes the microphone briefly, his voice carrying through the open air. A year ago, fire took what was written on paper, but it couldn't touch what was written on the heart. Let that remind us all, respect is not something to be earned through perfection. It's something owed by humanity. He steps down to applause, then fades into the crowd, blending with everyone else. For the first time, he feels invisible again, but this time, it feels like peace. As the camera pans out, over the bank, the city, the sunlight glinting off the river, a narrator's voice might whisper the final thought. Sometimes the greatest revolutions don't roar. They begin with a single man refusing to bow, refusing to hate, refusing to burn. And then, as the image fades to black, the last line lingers like a heartbeat. Would the world have changed if no one had been watching? Or did it change because for once everyone finally saw?